试一下。
说吗还是弹琴？
都可以。
都可以是吧？那我先就弹之前的。
好了。
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first piece I'm going to play, Campfire at Borderland, 边寨营火, is written by one of these composers that helped transform the ruan from an ensemble instrument to a solo instrument. His name is Jiliang, and he is also a ruan musician himself. I personally really like how this piece leverages different combinations of different techniques, playing techniques, to portray a vivid scene of people gathering, dancing, and celebrating around a bonfire at Borderland. I hope you enjoy. everyone. Welcome to the Synapse concert. Due to the technical issues we're experiencing right now, we're going to give our team a few more minutes to troubleshoot. And thank you for your patience in advance.
Three minutes.
Are we muted?
No.
everyone for coming to the Synapse opening concert today. My name is Yueqin Chen, and today I will be presenting select pieces on this instrument that I'm holding right now called ruan. And then also sharing some background and my thoughts on the pieces I'm going to play. Before we dive into the music part, let me first tell you a little bit more about Synapse. So Synapse is a composer workshop that made this concert possible. Synapse provides an incredibly unique opportunity that allows select composers to be guided through the composition process for new works on non-Western instruments. And the first series will feature this instrument ruan. The composers that participated in the program will also have their music works professionally recorded and virtually premiered. I encourage all composers out there and composers to be to check out the details below. All right, now let's take a look at this instrument together. So this instrument ruan has a very long history of over 2,000 years. Ruan is named after Ruan Xian, who was known for being a master on this instrument. He is also a scholar of the Jing dynasty as one of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, Zhuling Xixian. And the history of this instrument can be actually traced further back to the Qing and Han dynasties, Qing-Han 时期. And before the Tang dynasty, it was often referred to as Qing pipa. So pipa is also a lute-like instrument in pear shape compared to the ruan in round shape. You can find this instrument in some Chinese poems from the early days as well. And one of the famous poets from the Tang dynasty, whose name is Bai Juyi, once wrote 古调何人识，初闻满座经, when he first heard about this instrument. That line means it has an ancient tune that no one had heard of before, and then it overflows with full of surprises upon first encounter. However, despite the instrument's long history, the ruan had not evolved as much as some of the other Chinese instruments out there, such as erhu, pipa, guzheng, primarily due to the fact that for a very long time, the ruan served as more of an ensemble instrument rather than a solo instrument. But in the last century or so, a few ruan composers created new and revolutionary works that really made this instrument, kind of stand out as a solo instrument. The works they created, gave this instrument so much more possibilities as a solo instrument. And today, I'm very glad to share some of these new works for this instrument, for the solo aspect that really enriched the repertoire of ruan. So the first piece I'm going to play, Campfire at Borderland, 边寨营火, is written by one of these composers that helped transform the ruan from an ensemble instrument to a solo instrument. His name is Jiliang, and he is also a ruan musician himself. I personally really like how this piece leverages different combinations of techniques to portray a really vivid scene of people gathering, dancing, and celebrating around a bonfire at Borderland. I hope you enjoy. So that's the first piece. Now let's move on to the second piece. Sorrow of Train Stars, 双生恨. This piece is transcribed from a traditional Cantonese song of the same name, and it actually describes a pretty sad story of two lovers that cannot stay together. The melody and tones in this piece may sound quite different from the first one, as well as the other pieces you hear today. So let's hear some Cantonese music on the run. everyone, welcome to the Synapse concert. Due to the technical issues we're experiencing right now, we're going to give our team a few minutes to troubleshoot, and thank you for your patience.
All right, we have questions.
Okay, so I guess we can take a few questions.
I usually expect a lot of extended techniques in the new compositions, especially when I work on with living composers, not knowing much about ruan. Is there any unique or extended techniques that emerges from such collaboration, and how do they differ from traditional playing?
Cool. I guess so. Just in case, I'm going to repeat the question real quick. The question is about whether there have been new techniques being discovered or explored while I work with composers on new pieces. I will say the question is absolutely yes. And that's what I will say for me as a performer. That's something what kind of excites me the most about, since it's about the new things that we can almost create together. I can probably give a few examples just to give you a sense of the types of techniques. So actually the last piece, right, we just heard, this piece is pretty straightforward. The techniques are, the standard picking. And on the left-hand side, things like sliding, and like left hand picking. But with both right and left hand, you can use them kind of like differently. So one of the things I actually kind of was able to do for this particular piece, even though it's not a new work, was kind of like use 2 fingers to pick 2 strings at the same time. And this one, I would say once you hear Mr. Liu Xing's work, who is another composer I'm going to share, whose works with you later today. He had used this technique quite extensively in some of his works. Another example I can give is for one of the ensemble pieces that I played. It was new created. At the time, I would say there was no technique to kind of like mix 2 strings for this instrument, because as you can tell, the strings are made of steel and are pretty tough. So it's not as easy to use like 绞弦, like kind of a crossing string on this instrument. But then we tried on that one, and I would say it worked really well. And show you the example real quick. It's this one. So what you're doing is you are pulling the 2nd string over the 1st string. So you kind of created this cross, and the resulting sound is like a very metal-y, kind of like hard sound. It's like this. You can kind of use the sound, I guess, to mimic some percussion sounds you want to add to a piece. So that's one example. This is on the left-hand side. And then for the right hand, for one of the new pieces that I was able to play as a concerto, for the opening, we were trying to create like a more, kind of like broad, I would say deep echoing sound. So after tried a few things, before it was just, again, simple picking, like. And then you can do, this is the simplest one. You can just do picking to repeat the note to create that echoing sound. But instead we tried this. Due to time constraint, I'm just sharing, like 2 as examples. If we have more time later, I would love to share more. So let's move on to the 3rd piece. The 3rd piece I'm going to play is called Camel Bells Along the Silk Road, 丝路驼铃. It is composed by Yong, and Mr. Yong is also a ruan musician himself. The excerpts from this piece were actually used in an Oscar award, winning movie. You might have heard of this movie called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, 卧虎藏龙, by director Li. And the song depicts various scenes as a caramel caravan travels from the Middle East to China via the Silk Road. This piece is one of the, I will say, most iconic works for this instrument. I hope you enjoy. under the traditional style for this instrument. The next two pieces I'm going to play are written by Mr. Liu Xing. Mr. Liu Xing, he actually produced a lot of his works by just trying out new things on the run before putting them into music scores. Since he is, again, a run musician himself, he has a very unique and distinct voice in his music, in my opinion, that really sets him apart from many composers who focus on the classical or traditional styles. So the first piece of the two is the second movement of the very first ruan concerto in the world, called Reminiscences of Yunnan, Yunnan回忆. So Yunnan is a province on the southwest side of China, and known for its beautiful scenery as well as the diversity of ethnic groups that live there. When Liu Xing wrote this piece, he actually had never not been to Yunnan himself yet. Instead, he was listening to his wife talking about her childhood stories in the Yunnan province and composed this piece out of imagination. So the second movement is called sluggish adagio. As you can imagine, it's going to be a rather calm and slow piece.
We have a question. One more question.
Okay, we have more questions.
Is there any transcriptions of Western music for ruan?
So the question is, have there been transcribed works from Western music on the ruan? The answer is absolutely yes. So as mentioned, this instrument, right, like for a very long time, it was treated as more of like an ensemble instrument. So actually for me, when I first started learning this instrument at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, there were like pretty limited selection of works that I can choose from, or my professor at the time could choose from. So one of the things we did was being creative and taking, works from other instruments, as well as Western, pieces to be played on the ruan. So I can demonstrate a quick example for the, cello suite, by Bach. This is, I think, the G major cello suite, and I'm going to play a little bit of the prelude so you can hear, I guess, how it might sound very differently from, the cello. And I guess this is probably not so new for composers, but I guess if for those who are new to this instrument or to just to music altogether, when we transcribe works, we oftentimes have to change the tone, because otherwise the range of the instrument may not be suitable for the piece. So for the this example, I believe we had to move from C major to G major on this one. Well, the other way is like we have to kind of like increase the key by, I think, 5 notes in order to play on this instrument. So if you compare the tune on this instrument and the one on cello, the tuning will be different. So that's an example of a piece from Western music that has been transcribed on the ruan. There have been other pieces from, let's say, the pipa, or as a previous example you already heard, Cantonese music that have been transcribed on the ruan as well. And then in terms of transcription, I actually have a pretty interesting story to tell for one of the new works that I got to play from composer Zhao Junyi, who is a composer from Malaysia. So he wrote a concerto for the suite of ruan. So this is the medium-sized ruan called zhong ruan. Zhong means medium. There is like a family of ruan similar to the family of like violin, cello, ranging from like high-pitched ruan, gaoying ruan, all the way to diying ruan, bass ruan. So he initially composed, I believe it was the third movement of that concerto for gaoying ruan, the high-pitched ruan. But at the time, I did not have a gaoying ruan with me, and I do have a liuqin, which has the same range and pitch as the gaoying ruan. So we first tried on that instrument and didn't work out. So I then proposed an idea of playing that piece written for the gaoying ruan on zhong ruan. Initially, Junyi, the composer, he was a bit concerned since some of the techniques were, I will say, specifically written for gaoying ruan, which has like a shorter neck, meaning I sometimes I can move my fingers slightly more freely without sometimes spreading them too wide. So technique-wise, he was slightly concerned. It might be a challenge, but gladly by working together, we were able to move that piece onto zhong ruan and premiered it in the United States. And surprisingly, today that piece is mostly played on zhong ruan by other ruan players in the world than gaoying ruan, since I guess it worked out and people really like the sound of that piece on zhong ruan. So sometimes I will say transcription could produce new works that have surprisingly good results as well. Okay. So the next piece, folk song, Shangge, is also written by composer Liu Xing. This is going to be the last piece of today's concert. This piece has a wide range of sounds and techniques that composers almost like can use in a single piece. So this is, I will say, a piece that kind of shows you some new possibilities of instruments. This concert is made possible by the Synapse Composer Workshop, and I highly encourage you to check out the program using the link below. Now we can open to questions.
All right, the first question. How do you protect yourself from repetitive stress injury?
Oh, so the question is about, I guess, more about the performer. So how do I guess, prevent, myself from repetitive injuries? So I guess the first piece will be just being careful. I definitely did not do a great job of that since I actually broke my wrist last year. So I guess, one thing is just to be extremely careful, especially when you engage in like extreme, sports. But then when it comes to playing, I guess like we definitely, kind of like got into kind of like finger sometimes cuts, or sometimes when you play like too much, like your muscles tend to really become really tense. So for that, I guess it comes with experience, since your endurance actually does increase as you do more practice. So one is really about understanding your limit. So for me, I know when I'm tired and I need to maybe either switch up or play something different. And then another thing is, just like sometimes just, like really make sure that your fingers are given enough rest before you play again, especially if you kind of like had not played for a very long time. We all have calluses on our fingers, and if when you had not played for a long time, your calluses kind of aren't there. So this is kind of like a build-up process again, and then as you play more, the calluses started to come back. Then you can likely practice for longer. I hope that answers the question.
All right, question 2. Curious what size ruan this is and what tuning you are using. Do you also have play runs of other sizes?
Oh yeah. So
the first question is what size is
what
this?
Size? Okay, so the question is about what size is this ruan, the tuning of this ruan, and whether I have played other size runs. So yes, the answer is yes, I have played other sizes of ruan, ranging from like high pitched to small ruan, to da ruan, the large ruan, and then Ning ruan, bass ruan, because we when I was in high school, we had a ruan ensemble that has all of the different sizes of ruan, indie ruan ensembles. I was fortunate enough to try and play the other size ruans as being part of the ensemble member. Tuning wise, this ruan is tuned in GD. And by the way, this is Zhong ruan, the medium sized one. So this one's right in the middle. It's GD. So it's like, not so quite one octave lower than the violin tuning, but violin uses GD, AE. So it's one octave lower than the violin, but with GD.
All right, we have another question. It's the question for the fourth piece. You mentioned that Mr. Liu Xing wrote this piece based on his imagination after hearing about Yunnan province, but had not been there before. Does his piece have any relation to the music of the province?
Okay, so the question is about the fourth piece, Reminiscences of Yunnan, written by Mr. Liu Xing, because he had not been to the province before. And like I guess whether the piece itself has any relation to the province. I think he was definitely inspired by the province, whether it's the natural landscape there or the folk tunes there. You can hear from the piece right there. It's still kind of like the tone is still more on the pentatonic side of music. So I think he definitely got inspired, but I don't think he used any of the, let's say, the folk pieces directly in this one. It's more I think he used more some of the elements from music in the Yunnan province.
Right, another question. So, did he ever speak to word how this imaginative take on the place squared with his experiences after he had traveled there? Had he traveled to Yunnan?
Oh, so the question is about whether, like Mr. Liu Xing,
His imaginative take.
whether I guess he kind of like correspond some of his imaginative take on the region, the province, right, with his like real world experience visiting Yunnan. I am not sure. Even though I believe, based on some of the documentaries I've seen, I think he definitely visited Yunnan at some point. Actually, I think Yunnan is one of the I guess favorite destinations for a lot of artists when they want to go somewhere to find inspiration for their works. Because again, it's really beautiful. If you want to write some, the music more about like scenery, but the diverse ethnic groups there are a lot of folk songs, folk music styles that you can really experience when you go there. So all of the art culture, the diverse culture from Yunnan often serves as like a source of inspiration for a lot of artists.
Okay, next question is for the third piece. I'm curious about the bell-like sounds at the beginning of the third piece. Can you explain how that sound is made?
Okay, so this question is about the third piece, Camel Bells Along the Silk Road. I think the question is more about the beginning of the piece when I played harmonics that I guess, sound like bell-like sound to mimic, camel bells. So these are just harmonics on this instrument, not unique to this instrument. Other string instruments have harmonics as well, but this is the natural harmonic sound I used. So for natural harmonics, you just have to find the right fret, I will say, in order to produce natural harmonics. Natural harmonics usually have like a better echo because you have like more range to play with, so you can find it here. So as you can see, the keys that you can play with natural harmonic technique could sometimes be pretty limited. So there is another way of doing it using artificial harmonics technique, which basically you are creating some sort of range with your right with your right hand. So there's another piece I played with artificial ones. And then switch to natural.
All right, we have last question. How about ruan's volume level? Can it be easily heard in a large ensemble?
So cool. So the question is about the volume of this instrument when, I guess, especially for like a concerto or ensemble setting, whether the instrument can be heard really well. I will say as a solo instrument, it depends on the venue and depends on the orchestra. I will say, if it's an orchestra that doesn't have a huge brass and percussion section, you can actually hear it pretty well as long as you place the solo player at the very front of the stage. However, if you're playing with a piece, actually this concerto, Reminiscences of Yunnan, there is a version with Western, like full scale orchestra. When you're playing with like a full orchestra with huge or pretty big emphasis on the brass and percussion sections, you sometimes do need like an amplifier for this instrument.
All right, that's
Yeah.
it for the concert.
Well, so that's it for the concert. Thanks to everyone for coming again. Again, if you're interested in learning more about Synapse, there is the description and link below. Please check it out. And don't be afraid if you are very new to the composition world. We have amazing instructors who can guide you through the entire process. And for this workshop series in particular, my fellow ruan musician and I will also be joining the workshop to work alongside with all the composers to make sure that we co-create pieces that kind of represent the voices you want to communicate via this instrument, but also fit the personality of the ruan. So thanks again for everyone, and look forward to seeing you very soon.